Welcome to the Hopkinton Zoning Advisory Committee meeting of November 7th, the public forum for zoning changes, bylaw changes. I wanted to first of all apologize for our rescheduling of the previous meeting, and I apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. It was a matter of, it was not posted in all the right places for the right length of time, therefore it would have been illegal for us to have held that night. So that's why it was rescheduled to tonight. Thanks. So, we are going to go ahead and start off with any members of the public who wish to come up and suggest or discuss anything with us in terms of zoning bylaw changes for this year. Come on up. Name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Falcione. I am a long-time business owner of in the downtown. I had a photography studio and a news organization at 24 Main Street. And for decades, I have witnessed the changes in the downtown. And I've seen most of the time, most of those years, it was very smooth sailing for pedestrians, for traffic, not a lot of foot traffic. Now there's a lot of foot traffic. You have a beautiful new library. Bill's Pizza is all redone. Have some businesses down by the Central House. And so I'm sitting here to suggest that when the Central House, not to their detriment, but when the Central House was permitted, they were allowed to have 1/2 of the parking that is allowed in other districts. Other districts would have, with the formula that was used to determine their parking, would have had 72 spaces. And I was there at that meeting. And they said, well, because of this bylaw we have for the downtown off-street parking, you only need 36. And so I think that that's caused nothing but trouble. It's wonderful that the business is doing so well, but until this new municipal lot is built and other lots might be built, there's going to continue to be some sort of problem with the parking there. As we see all over town, the parking that has been permitted, for instance at Starbucks, where there is no drive-through allowed. However, Madam Chair, it's very similar to a drive-through when you take into account the fact that they can order their food ahead of time on an app. And I don't think that's part of any of the ZAC or planning board discussions or considerations that there's an app that customers can order ahead of time and not even be in the building. So as a result, a lot of this has caused a lot of different problems in different areas of town. Recently, the drugstore was the first to put up a sign that said, you know, for a drugstore parking only. Bill's Pizza put up a sign similar, and then One Lumber Street put up a sign which specifically has the Starbucks logo and a cross out on it. And says just parking for this area. And now we see that Cross Point, that owns a lot where CVS and Marty's are located, has put signs up along their whole perimeter warning people that they will get towed and offering the number of the tow company for when you want to retrieve your vehicle. So there's a major problem. I would ask that ZAC consider rescinding that bylaw that allows the downtown off-street to have 50% less than everywhere else in town.
Thank you.
I say ZAC rescinding, I mean, if you would consider suggesting that to the planning board.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Hi.
I'm Terry. I know some of you. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
What's your address?
John.
What's your address?
What's that?
Address,
Address.
please.
17 Maple Street. Are you going to cover housing as part of your overall, is that what this evening's about? May possibly you're gonna cover, is that gonna be one of the things you cover, is your bylaws regarding multifamily housing?
Yes, that's certainly one of the zoning bylaws, so we can certainly consider any suggestions you have.
Okay. I was formerly an owner of apartment houses in town. I don't have any anymore. Don't intend to get any. But there's a little bit of looseness and ambiguity and unknown. I know at the town meeting, not this past year, but the year before, the annual town meeting, they were going to have a bylaw that you couldn't have an apartment building with no more than 2 family. So the present zoning, without any changes, I believe it could be either a 2 or 3 or a 4. Is that correct?
It is.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're going to visit that. And also, the meters for the water and the sewer almost become quite an issue. Would there be like one sewer charge for the whole house? Would there be one water charge for the whole house, et cetera, et cetera? I was just hoping that these might be some of the items that you would discuss.
Okay.
And
Do you feel that it should be separate meters for separate units in apartment buildings?
I haven't really looked at the numbers, but I think it should be. I think John will probably come up with a good. If he's assigned the project, he's the pro, and I have a lot of confidence in him. And I just think that's one of the things that we could look at.
Okay.
And also the setbacks as to whether or not they should be more stringent than they are for single-family houses, or whether it's a 2 or a 3 or a 4. Right now, I believe the zoning, if it's a 2-family, you're allowed to make it either a 3 or a 4, provided you meet with all the requirements of the board, the housing, the Chucky Cadillac, the building department. So I'm quite interested in how that turns out, because I think one of the philosophical things we should be looking at as far as housing goes, I think we should be trying to develop the opportunity for everybody to stay here. If somebody wants to graduate from high school and go right to work, if he wants to stay in Hopkins, he should be able to have a place where he can go. If he wants to go out and go to school for a few years and come back, or go out into the world for 10 years and come back. But it's very hard for people at the entry level to find housing in this town. Not just rental housing, even to purchase in the lower zones. I know, are you all familiar with the 40R? The zoning, the 40R? Yeah. That is something that might be looked at. I think a lot of the towns today are progressively going after that situation, and it basically allows you to have a $350,000 house that you could buy. It's, 3-bedroom,
Yep.
formica here and there, carpets here and there, but fine. And this is not only for the people that are in the younger age groups, we'll say up to 30, either single or double, or single mother or single father. But then again, you also get into the group that's, I know a few of my friends, a lot of people in this town lately have had to sell their house because of their age. They can't afford to stay here. They don't want to go into the housing. They have too much money to go into the housing. They would rather, and there's just absolutely nothing for them to do. They're in a house that's probably worth $700,000. The taxes are killing them. They don't need the 4 bedrooms anymore. The kids are all spread across the United States. There's nothing for them to stay in Hopkins. We're forcing them out of town.
Yep.
So somewhere along the line, either in ownership or in rentals, I was hoping that you might focus on being able to entertain their problem. What else did I have for you? On a little bit of another subject, but still in housing, I think you need to tighten up some regulations about in-law apartments and also an apartment that's connected to a house. A single-family house wants to make an apartment next to it over the garage or something like that, what the regulations might be, or is it allowable anywhere or everywhere or by special permit only, or is it as by use? Can you do it or can't you do it? I'm not here to say I'm for this or I'm for that, but I'm kind of interested in you as professionals covering these subjects, because it's been a long time since any planning board or ZAC board has gone in and picked this subject apart and come back with a conclusive study that really meant something and went and got it approved at the town meeting. So that not so many of these things would have to go to the ZBA for decisions all the time. It's expensive for somebody to do that, by the time you advertise and you get an attorney and you get an engineer and whatever.
Yeah. So a few years ago, we did take something to the town meeting regarding accessory apartments, and with the goal of having fewer of them go to the ZBA.
Having what?
I think fewer of the homeowners needing to go to the ZBA for approval.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That was the goal at the time. We did not get it passed, but we have discussed some possible ways to relook at that, and this next year.
Well, I think one of the reasons, Mary, that it didn't get passed was because it limited it to two units.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that was too restrictive for the townspeople, I believe, at the time. Because a lot of people have the old houses along, Grove Street or somewhere where they could easily convert it into two apartments on the first and one on the second, or even a third up on the third floor. They could put a third apartment up there very easily, a little studio. And I think it would be do two things. It would help the elderly, and it would help the younger people. But another question I have on the in-law apartments, which I know there are quite a few of them in town. I don't think there have been many houses that were built as in-laws from day one, but they were conversions. Mm-hmm. But some of them, there are some. There's one, I know there's one in Teresa Road that was built that way 40 years ago. What happens when that person, say it's the mother-in-law or the grandma or somebody, decides to move into an assisted living place or passes or something happens like that? It's not, there's nothing in the books that says that you can rent that out to somebody. And what does someone do with a thing like that? They've all of a sudden, grandma's coming back to town, we're gonna spend $40,000 or $50,000 in today's money to fix it up so that she can have a little place to park her car, and now all of a sudden, 4 years later, she got older, grandpa passed on or something, and they want to, for one reason or other, they need to make a change. It could be even a child. It could be even a single mother that wants to come back and live as in an in-law apartment. They would hopefully qualify. But I think when they're converted from in-law and the in-law leaves, I don't think the burden should remain with the homeowner, because he almost has to sell it unless he can rent it. He's not going to be able to rent it unless he has the proper double exits, separate heating systems, separate whatever. Maybe not have separate heating systems, but there would be a criteria. But that ought to be in black and white so that it would be an easy transition for when the person who passes on or leaves the in-law apartment goes. It could automatically become an income earning property right on the same premises. I know there's going to be some people that might object to that, but again, you're getting back to what do we want to have for a town here? We don't want to be elitist. We want to be inclusive. And if we're gonna do that, and we really mean it, we're gonna have to deal with the younger people, and we're gonna deal with the older people. And finances are very important too. I think we got a lot going for us now, because the new town planner is probably the best one we've had here since Charlie Zedek was a town planner when he came from Worcester 80 years ago. And this guy is good, and he's got the background, and he's got the ambition, and before he goes on to bigger and better pastures, I think we should get him to work on something like this.
Thank you. Yes. Does anyone else have clarification questions for Mr. Terry on some of his suggestions?
So, that's about it.
Yeah, well, one of the things I want to clarify is that, you know, when Mr. Terry was talking about the 40R, which brings us to, the state has it at 8 units, 8 single-family homes per acre, 12 12 townhouses or 20 condominiums per acre. But 20% of them have to be affordable. The town automatically, or city automatically gets a kickback from the state of anywhere from $10,000 to $600,000 plus $3,000 for every unit that they put up in this district. But then people say, well, what we have in Hopkinton is more school children. We don't want more school children. Well, the state understands that, and then there's also a 40S that goes along with the 40R. And the 40S, they have an algorithm, and the town actually gets money from the state to educate the students that come from the 40R. So it ends up being a very good program for both having affordable housing as well as being able to educate the kids that come in. So it was a great suggestion.
Right. Some of the criteria that mentioned is movable. An acre doesn't have to have eight homes.
No, you can have up to, is what, that's...
Yeah, but that isn't anything that I don't think we're interested in advocating here, but I think John knows more about 40R than any of us. And if he were to present something, if he were asked to present something to the board that would be informative and conclusive, I think the board and then eventually the town could maybe go that way if that was a way that the board felt. Probably would go through the planning board too, so. But if you're gonna, what John said needs a lot more depth put to it, a lot more explanation, because, you know, he summarized it, which is dangerous. So if you're going to think about 40R, you should all learn what 40R is.
It's otherwise, if I may, it's otherwise known as live, work, and play. They tend to try and have these near transportation areas or downtowns, so that people can take advantage of all the aspects of it.
Rather than not to say anything against you, John, but rather than have you tell the board what it's all about, we have a professional, and he's a teacher, and he could tell the board. He's right over there.
It's got a good name, too.
Thank you very much.
It went to a great school.
Where did you go? Would any of you like to speak? Hello.
My name is Srini. I'm from Legacy Farms North. 19 Juniper Trail is my address. 19 Juniper Trail. Juniper.
I'm sorry, what was your last name?
Vijay, Bijay. Hope we all know what the agenda for North members have here. It's one and only concern and appeal to all the members here about the school bus stop that we want to move up the Spruce Street location. We all know what's going on with this with the school bus issue here. It's 250 plus families that we are located there, and phase 2 of our project is already complete. which means that we are at full capacity, and we have almost 180 students as of October 2019, who are boarding the bus from Franklin Junction, and also there is a new bus stop at Wilson and 85 North intersection. The major concern that we have at this point is the growing number of students from our community has an imminent danger of getting into some sort of an unwanted situation on both bus stops, because the bus is not coming close to our location. We have to drive almost 150 cars that goes between 6 and 8 o'clock, which is also a very rush hour for the office traffic. And not to mention, though the road from Franklin all the way to Wilson is still considered a private road, there is a good amount of public common traffic that is using that road to bypass the 135 North traffic congestion, I would say. So given all these considerations, we would request the committee to consider moving the bus stop all the way up to Spruce Street or somewhat closer to Spruce Street, so we have more safety for our kids. And at the same time, we all have kids whom we brought up to a great age now. They wander all the time. It's not that they just get off the bus and they listen to us quietly. We wish that would happen, but it doesn't happen all the time. And most often we carpool with 2 or 3 kids. So it's not just managing one kid of our own who normally don't listen to us always. It's bunch of kids that we want to manage at that time. And we also found a few instances where, though the school bus is stopped there, the traffic doesn't recognize that it is a stop, that they want to wait until the school bus leaves, and people by mistake or unknowingly leave the junction to move forward, which is even more dangerous. Mm-hmm. And with kids running all around the place, it's hard to keep control of anything, be the traffic, the kids, or our mindset to keep them and take them back home in a safer position. I'm sure John knows more about this. We have been talking and meeting with John quite often, bringing up this topic. But from the zoning advisory committee, what we appeal here is consider this as a very serious safety concern and help us get this onto the special town meeting by any chance, so we can get a public vote. We can show them, we have some presentations and videos where we can show the real threat with all the heavy duty construction vehicles that keeps piling up on a daily basis to finish the other phase, and how the threat is more serious compared to any other bus stop location for Hopkinton school buses.
So just for those members who aren't as aware of this issue, obviously, John and Carol and I on planning board this past year, we've also visited the location as well. And the problem with this is that the streets are normally not accepted as town streets until a subdivision is absolutely complete. And this is a situation where we want to possibly have the special town meeting accept the street early with, contingencies, and to make sure it's completed correctly when the subdivision is all construction is done. But it is a very severe safety issue for the school kids. There's a lot of school children getting on buses, and they're getting on buses. They have to get on the buses way at the end of the road. They cannot walk there easily.
At least a mile. At least a mile from Spruce Street, or there are even houses beyond Spruce Street which takes another half a mile to get in to their houses.
So the parents have been, doing the best they could, carpooling and getting people down to the bus stop, but at the place where the bus stops are, there's no place for parking. And so we've been looking at a lot of temporary possible solutions, that was, possible temporary solution down at 135, and a temporary parking lot. And that, again, was only going to suffice for a short amount of time. But now that we may have the opportunity at special town meeting, I personally support, the acceptance of that road, and I think that we can properly put contingencies in place to make it work, and I'm hoping that all of you can individually support this as well.
Well, what we have, if I may through the chair, what we have to be careful of is that as Zach, we change bylaws. I don't know, and to go completely against what the bylaw says right now. I don't know if we can do that at town meeting. What we should really try and do is to modify the bylaw so that a road such as that can be accepted, and that might be a better way to get it through town meeting. So we're not saying we're going against DPW, we're going against everything, but to modify the bylaw so a road such as that can be accepted.
I'd like to discuss that more, obviously not tonight, but I wouldn't. Perhaps it is a change to the bylaw to allow exceptions to the rule, because I don't think that we want to accept all roads before they're finished, normally. This is a very much an exception to the rule.
State money was used to build it, that's why, so it's almost really a public road already.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a special situation, which may or may not be appropriate to change the bylaw when it's a very special situation, but we can discuss that, definitely. So either way, I don't think as a committee we can go up there and support the change, I agree, but individually we can consider that. And we will discuss whether or not a bylaw change is appropriate as well, so.
So can I ask you a question? Is there a timeline for the construction completion?
Very good question. The current timeline is 2022 for phase 3 to complete, but that does not necessarily mean it is just with Pulte group that they are building the phase 3 to complete, but there is also the other affordable housing that goes beyond legacy farms, beyond the Pulte construction, which is called the Trails in Harpington, and that I'm not sure what is the timeline for that to complete. And just correct me here, the road can be accepted as completely public only after the Trails is also complete and all the houses within Pulte is being sold and handed over to a house owner. So that's
I
3 years, 4 years.
No, thank you for making us this issue I've heard about this issue even last year, came up in the planning board meetings and all that stuff, school committee meetings, and we were always told that it was a insurance problem, that the bus company doesn't have insurance to drive in these roads, and we were stuck in like a cyclical thing. So I kept thinking, unfortunately, it looked like the only solution was to wait for construction to be completed. That's why I'm trying to figure out, is there anything, maybe if we have a timeline, we can consider what are the other options and stuff.
Sure, so we, even from our community, we tried to reach out to multiple different bus companies, private transportations. They are fine transporting anyone, but not when it comes to kids. There is always the straight answer no that we get from them. Even with additional insurance that Mr. Roy wanted to shell some money out of his pocket for insurance, it never gone past the bus companies. So carpool is the best option that we have right now, but again, unless the road has been termed public, the solution is not going to fix the problem that we have right now.
So God forbid, but this almost seems to be an accident waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Given that more and more kids are going to use that bus stop. Outside of this committee, has there been any, and I'm asking, the more senior members of this committee, as to, has there been any conversation about temporary measures? I understand what the bylaws say about this not being completely accepted till construction is over, but given this is a serious public safety issue involving children,
Well, that's why we had several meetings with the developer and Pulte, and as well as other committees, the school committee and the superintendent, and we did come up with a parking lot at the end near the old White House, and they worked it out so that the buses would stop there, but many people thought that was, didn't feel as though it was a good enough solution. So now we're back to trying to do what we can to accelerate the acceptance. And so that's where we're at right now.
But several other temporary solutions were discussed and rejected for various reasons as well. And that was the best one.
And to his point, one of the first ones we looked at was trying to get another bus company.
Yeah.
But for some reason, no other bus companies will come into another bus company's territory. And the developer did find a bus company that would send buses over, but they would only send luxury buses with the kneel down with the air conditioning and televisions inside, and that would have been $300,000 a year per bus. And currently, we pay about $50,000 a year per bus through the school, so it was cost prohibitive at the time.
The only question that we have is, the road is considered as a public-private road. I'm not sure what does the term mean, a public-private road. Is it not a completely private road where we can say that between this and this time, the school boarding time, no public transportation can be made? Just throwing out some possibilities if something of that sort can be considered for a specific timeline. So, that can be one of the options that we were thinking. But again, the ultimate solution here would be accepting the road as public with any contingencies that would be seemed appropriate, if not any other better solution.
John, can you speak to the...
So there's a few things that I would like to bring up through the chair. It's a private road. It's not a public-private road. I don't think that's a thing. It's privately owned. That's the reason the buses can't go on it. So it's got its own set of issues because of that. In terms of having this road accepted at the special town meeting, it's looking more and more like that's not going to happen. I've been talking to town council trying to get this all set up, and the timeline to get a road accepted has a lot of requirements. Notification of the owner, having the select board meeting, then referring it to the planning board. It looks like if it can work, you're having like 1 day of play in between to get all the requirements done. And that's not including a review by the town's engineer to see what still needs to be completed. We have a review from 2016 that basically lays out how much bond money was supposed to be paid. Nothing's been updated since then because it's a private road with construction going on it. So the town would be taking a risk by accepting the road without having that review done. And talking with town council, I don't even know if that timeline is going to work just based on the required notifications, waiting periods in between hearings and stuff like that, because it's been such a short timeline to get this, and quick notice to get this special town meeting set up. So it may be more appropriate to get it for the annual town meeting, but the special town meeting might be a real reach.
Pardon my ignorance here, but we have been discussing about this issue for almost 3 years.
I understand that, but the town meeting was just called for a completely separate issue, so nothing was prepared for this town meeting because no one knew it was going to happen.
Okay.
So once we found out it was going to happen, I had been researching it. It's still technically a possibility. I need to talk to town council and get a hard answer from them. But just with the timeline that was laid out, it's a real struggle to get everything that's needed to follow the town's bylaws to get a road accepted. It's a real struggle to get all that.
What would be the timeline that we are looking at?
That's what I need to clear up with the town council, because it looks like if the planning board has a meeting to refer, so first of all, the planning board needs to get 100 signatures. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But to get those 100 signatures, the planning board then has to introduce that to the select board. The select board may need to refer it back to the planning board, or if the planning board brings it before the select board, that's the confusion I'm having with town council. I haven't got an answer about that. If the select board needs to meet on it and refer it back to the planning board, that's an issue in of itself, because you need to get the 100 signatures, the select board would have to hold a hearing, and then refer back to the planning board, which have to hold a hearing. Both of those have to be noticed for 48 hours beforehand. And then you would need to get the warrant article into the town clerk by the 21st to get signed off on the 22nd, because that's the hard deadline for the 9th. If the planning board has a meeting on the 13th, and they say they have the 100 signatures at that point on the 13th, they need to then refer it to the select board. The select board needs to notify the owner 7 days prior to a hearing. So if the select board has a meeting on the 18th, or sorry, it's the 19th, I think is the regular scheduled select board meeting, they may need to notify next Tuesday in order to meet that timeline. So there's also confusion as if the planning board has to send this to the select board, can the select board schedule a meeting without even having a proposal from the planning board at that point? And I've heard, no, they can't. So basically you have to wait until the 13th when the planning board can vote to send that to the select board, and then you're already past the 7-day timeline to notify the owner, so then you can't add it to the agenda or to the warrant article on the 21st. So these are all the things that I'm trying to clear up with town council, and I haven't gotten an answer yet. But it's just looking like the required notifications to the owner for the meetings and all that kind of stuff is a really, really tight window. So basically the planning board, another thing to add is the planning board would meet on the 13th, but it would be the night of the 13th. You can't file anything until the 14th. So then if the 14th happens and say the select board met on the 21st to approve it, the notification would have to be to the owner on the 14th. So it's like, depending on what happens,
So it's
a
a
real
deadlock
struggle.
that I'm assuming that it is a deadlock on all possible angles that this cannot move forward.
It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say it's a deadlock, it's just with the short timeline and the availability of members for the planning board and select board and when they can meet and try and get all this in time, and with the set requirements for notification in the bylaws, it might not really work, because it's only a 4-week notification from when the select board voted to allow a special town meeting.
When would be our next regular town meeting?
In May 4th. Yeah.
By that time, we would have crossed the winter where it is even more dangerous for our kids to use that bus stop with snow piling all around the pavement where we usually have to park the car. We will have to park on the street where the regular public traffic will still be using that. Now, when we say it is a private road, what would it take us to have the road not being used by regular public for a certain period of time? Is that something the town can help us, Zach or any other committee, where we can approach to say that the public traffic cannot be happening between this time and this time, to enforce that?
I don't know what's involved in shutting
I
the
mean,
road.
it's a private road, so it would be up to Roy McDowell, I would believe, to handle any kind of traffic on that. I mean, maybe the police could be at the intersection with the public road, I don't know.
So we have tried that option. I mean, John has spoken to the chief, and they came there at least a couple of times to witness what is going on, how much traffic is there. And they do agree that there is a big safety concern, given the road is being used by regular public plus school timing traffic and office peak hour traffic, etc. But he's been helpful to begin with, but at the same time it is not a daily scenario where we have a cop waiting there monitoring the traffic, which might not be feasible from their point of view as well. But anything that can make it safer, much more safer for the kids, will be really appreciated.
So if I may, through the chair, the planning board is having a meeting on the 13th, whether or not they can get this road on the special town meeting, and they are going to discuss the bus stop issue. So I'd encourage all of you guys to attend and discuss. I've invited town manager, assistant town manager, select board chair, fire, police, school committee, superintendent. So hopefully all of them will be there. You can get everybody in the same room and discuss it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Chief, do you have any suggestions?
For the problem?
No.
I think I'm gonna just follow your agenda and need me to comment at all.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's
No
fine.
driveway stuff or any of that stuff? You had some good ones a few years ago.
Okay.
Or rookie
So,
stuff.
in addition, we received several suggestions by email or memo. So, these. So I'm going to read them or summarize them. This suggestion is from Tom Garabedian from 5 Davenport Lane. So, as a spokesperson for a group of condominiums located within the town of Hopkinton with more than 210 homeowners, I'm asking Zach to consider advancing a change in the zoning bylaws as they relate to Article 8, garden apartments, and Article 8A, village housing and residential districts. Specifically, we're requesting that the zoning changes passed by town meeting in May 2016 for rubbish disposal be reversed. As a matter of equity, homeowners who live and own units within these developments should be entitled to rubbish disposal services within the property taxes which we pay. There are at least 30 other communities within the Commonwealth, according to the Boston Globe, where all homeowners are treated equivalently with respect to rubbish disposal and recycling services. The requested change would cause rubbish disposal services to be provided by the town. Respectfully submitted. Okay, this is, and he is representing Davenport Village, the Preserve, Indian Brook, and Stagecoach condominiums, members of those communities. So we will definitely add it to the list and discuss it again. It has been discussed in this past year, and we will probably have to look into any agreements with the condominium developers at the times that they were developed to see what,
Special permits.
and the special permits that were issued at that time. Because I do not know, I honestly do not know, but if they were developed with specific agreements that the trash services were provided through a homeowners association, and it wasn't just a matter of this bylaw, then it has to be considered in that way. That means that certain concessions were given to the developers so that they didn't have to do as much to prepare the property for trash pickup and so on. And then therefore, the property taxes are actually not, covering that concession aspect. So that's what we need to investigate in order to make that a reality.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
So is the implication of Mr. Thomas's letter that until May 2016, when the town meeting reversed the changes, rubbish pickup was being done by the town?
That's what it seems to imply, but that is not what I know to be true, one way or the other. I'm really not sure until
Okay.
we do the research. It could be true for, some of the condominiums and not others. I'm just not sure
Okay.
what the situation is. Okay.
Got it.
Okay. Some of the other ones received by email. Okay. This has to do with the downtown corridor construction, suggestion by Amy Ritterbusch to relax some zoning restrictions temporarily during downtown corridor construction, specifically off-premises signs and temporary signs. So off-premises signs are not allowed now, but during construction, businesses may need to place a few signs, a few buildings away to alert people how to find them. Our limit on number of temporary signs could be relaxed because businesses need to post directional signs to alternate parking or alternate entrances. And she said, these are just some of the ideas. I'd encourage Zach to talk to land use staff, Mass DOT, business owners on Main Street, et cetera, and there may be better ideas. And I also suggest that we consult with the select board and town manager and so on, and see what is being done in those situations, and just make sure we're all working in concert. So, okay. change to pre-existing structure or designating minor changes. This is suggested by Mike Shepherd and supported by Mark Hyman, the chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So Mike had described where homeowner of a pre-existing non-conforming structure applying for a building permit to expand the structure generally has to go to the ZBA because perhaps the expansion falls within a setback from the road or from side or rear. And he's suggesting that we consider a change to the zoning bylaws that allows the zoning enforcement officer some leeway in determining whether or not the change is minor, and suggested minor change would be dormers, which is not expanding the footprint of a building, but would be within a pre-existing structure in that setback problem, So I think it's perfectly reasonable. He says a lot of other jurisdictions do allow for the zoning enforcement officer to have that leeway to determine whether the proposed change is minor or whether it needs to go to the ZBA. So that's a good one to discuss. And Airbnb, it comes up again. Also suggested by Mike Shepherd, Mark Hyman also supported looking into this, and he's sent us some references, internet references. So, Mike says he had an inquiry about the legality of an Airbnb on Maspinock. On the one hand, I can find nothing in our zoning that specifically allows it. That's true. It is my understanding that these things are not owner-occupied and the duration of stay is relatively short. He references the B&Bs that are allowed in the zoning. I've always assumed zoning did not deal with forms of ownership. For example, as a homeowner, I could rent my house for a week, a month, or even one day. But B&B naysayers are concerned about properties not being properly maintained, the turnover of occupants, and concern about safety from unknown short-term renters. And so he just suggests that we take a look at that. And if we leave it without anything in the zoning bylaws, that we might be opening the town up for some fees from town council if somebody tries to appeal to the zoning board to be able to do it in a B&B, an Airbnb. So, reasonable. Good. I think there were some other ones, John, that should be added to our list.
So there's three more. I got a email exchange with Barry Rosenblum today about residential solar. And there was one example that he had a concern about, but we found out it was a commercial solar development, but he brought that up about residential solar and asking if there could be some more specific buffers for visual effects when it's developed near residential uses. Right now it's kind of subjective, but he was wondering if there was any way that it could be modified to address any kind of visual effects of those kind of uses.
Okay.
Nothing too specific in the bylaw, but he was just asking it as a general question. The other one is looking into form-based code and if that would be something that would be worthwhile in Hopkinton. So form-based code is a type of zoning where you don't necessarily regulate the use, you regulate the form of the building. It's usually used in downtowns or in other kind of high development nodes. And it's just kind of something that's been moving across the country and something that might want to take a look at as part of ZAC. And then the final thing is expiration of permits. So Kobe, Wallace, and I, today, we're just talking about certain permits don't have expiration dates listed in the bylaws, and we were wondering if that would be something that should be addressed, given that we have a subdivision coming in. It didn't have to get a stormwater management permit, but it brought up the issue of if a development gets issued a stormwater management permit and then 15 years later they want to go and actually develop it, are they beholden to the previous stormwater regulations or the current stormwater regulations? And by putting an expiration date on that, it might ease some of those concerns by making them get a new permit more in line with the current regulations. And scenic road is another one, earth removal, those type of things. They don't have expiration dates. Special permits are state mandated to have an expiration date, so they do, but other local permits, it might be worth taking a look at and seeing if that would be something that the town would want to take under.
Thank you. Now, was it from the emails?
That was, those weren't emails. 2 of those were me.
Oh, okay.
And one of them, I guess, was an email, but yes, that's
And
it.
through the chair, I heard one more that when we talk about commercial solar, we don't make a distinction between ground-based and roof-based. And we should probably take a look at that because, some of the, like when we put them on top of the schools and some other things, we may be touching off some of the same screening requirements that really aren't applicable.
Got it. In certain towns, when we have been looking at the solar, certain towns have that we've used for comparison purposes or to get ideas, have restricted ground completely and encourage a lot of roof-based ones, so that's also appropriate to look at. Good. Okay, oops, minutes. I cannot find the agenda. I know that, I'm sorry, you came in a little later. Did you have any suggestions for us, or were you just, okay, good. All right. So, several of us went to various trainings or demonstrations and so on recently, and I was hoping that, Ron, you could go through.
Could I just give a presentation on some chamber recommendations?
Absolutely.
Before we get into that?
I'm sorry.
So some of these...
Forgot to ask the ZAC members for
Ron Foisey, 25 Chamberlain Street, and the chamber liaison to zoning advisory. So the first one is a reprise of last year where we're recommending an increase in retail from the current 2,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. One of the discussions that we had last year was, why 5,000, why 2,000, why 10,000? There's no compelling reason, but we're not getting any interest or any traction at the current 2,000, and there's just there's a feeling among the developers that a larger retail square footage may attract developers to want to come into the area. So that would be for industrial A and B.
2,000 to 10,000, you said?
From 2,000 to 10,000.
10,000.
It's
That would
currently.
be by right.
That is currently by right. Yeah. The second one would be a recommendation to remove the car wash by right in the downtown business zone.
Yeah, that's already on our work plan, absolutely.
Okay. The next one would be to add a car wash by right to industrial A and B, and the 169 West Main Street, which is the business zone where Dr. Mena's office is, around the corner from the Price Chopper. The fourth one would be, this is not a specific recommendation, but to review parking space requirements for certain types of uses in industrial A and B. A lot of the current parking requires a lot of spaces that the current uses aren't. Office space is a tremendous glut in the Metro West area. So the types of businesses that are coming in are like Lycan or, and the number of people per square foot of space is significantly less.
Yeah, for warehouses, manufacturing.
It's a very different thing, and so the idea is, we have to take a look at certain uses where we might create some relief in the parking requirements to better attract some of those people in there. And the last one is, I'm going to pass out just give you a map of an area. And this would be kind of a focus on 80 South Street, where the town hall was temporarily post-flood.
Right.
And that's a building that, according to the developers that we're in contact with, that building is completely obsolete. And
Ron, do you want to hand some out there? Thanks.
That building is obsolete and could lend itself to some kind of a,
You said the building is obsolete, meaning?
yeah. It's just not, it's not conducive to any of the current uses, so it's essentially a tear down.
Okay.
You're talking about the building that Town Hall was in for a minute?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, develop some kind of a planning vision for the zone to be a hub of multiple type things. Light industrial, biotech lab businesses, try to attract more services to town, like restaurants and other things that both residences and businesses are looking for in the area. Maybe a multi-use thing where you've got some residential built into that area. And again, none of these are specific recommendations, but the idea is to take a look at that parcel and say, can we as a planning community come up with an area that would be more appealing to a broader use of people coming in than just another office building that is vacant. So
Like an opportunity zone, like the feds are doing for certain areas, like they did in Worcester and some of the other major cities, that they encourage unique development. Okay.
How big is the property? Do you know?
Oh, the property itself?
Yes.
Well, if you look at the map, it's much broader than just that building, but that's a big part of it. I don't know what the acreage or square footage is of that property.
All right, thanks.
But it's one of those things that Dell has, they've been sitting on it and will continue to sit on it because there's really no demand for that building.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And if I may, through the chair, one of the issues is that, if Dell vacates any more of the buildings, that there's not much call for office space right now. And so what else can those buildings be utilized for, other than office, so that the town can still pull the applicable taxes, or similar taxes, as opposed to having no personal property tax?
So, I'm sorry, just a quick question, Ron. The image says, is it like a commuter thing? Is that like a WRTS stop or something?
That's one of the things that would be
Has? Okay. That's
as a potential. Yeah.
That's 80 South Street? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all. Okay, good. And does anyone else have any suggestions?
Just going back to what John said about how to use these buildings if Dell indeed is no longer using it. There has definitely been the whole WeWork concept, where people who are working from home who actually want an office location to go to, almost like an office center, where a day-long rental or maybe in a few hours kind of rental, where everything is self-contained within that. You've got internet access, you've got air conditioning, electricity, everything else. So, and you have a small cubicle where instead of working from home, you actually go into a professional setup and use that space as your home work away from home, but instead of going to an office. So that definitely seems to be a trend catching up. WeWork, of course, was in the news for all the wrong reasons, right. But companies like Staples are doing this, creating very fancy places where You can have a small meeting hall with WebEx services, a nice foyer with a couch, and we can meet someone. So I think there are possibilities that can be looked into.
There's also the biotech incubators, which would include lab space potentially, so.
We're hoping that this is kind of a catalyst for thought, that
Yeah.
says, let's think outside the box and try to come up with some, we don't need more office space.
Right.
Let's
right.
come up with
Right,
something that will really attract people to come into the area.
And residential, and stuff for residents too, you know, this isn't just for business, you know, what are some amenities that we can put there for the residents of Hopkinton that might spur other companies for saying, well, look at, they did this, and it just grows by itself, almost like what Mr. Terry was talking about, live, work, and play.
Right.
You know, this could be a great area for what he was just talking about, where we put some dense housing, which the workers are there, and then there's already the buildings are there, and then we build some, and it grows and grows and grows.
So this is a big picture, long-term plan. This isn't necessarily something that I would recommend putting on the agenda, getting ready for town meeting. But post-town meeting, when we can take a step back and really, you know, dig into it.
So I was wondering if there is a way to, because just checking on the conversation, like if there is a way to sell it to the new things that we have added on. We've always allowed office space by right. It's still unoccupied.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the last 2 years. What have we allowed by right? Say an entertainment space, or focusing on just the new things that we have allowed, maybe pushing it towards that and making it more like attractive to that kind of business. Say for example, for the entertainment, if there is a way that we can make the parking requirements fit the entertainment need, maybe we attract a new entertainment space in there or stuff that way.
Or maybe we invite some other towns that were successful at doing this and having some of their planners or maybe their ZAC or their planning board chair or something to come in and say, how did you do it? You know, and maybe that can help us get something done.
Excellent.
Good, thank you. All right, so can you go through
Yeah.
your recent training session?
So John had sent out a list of a bunch of trainings for planning and zoning, and I attended the Adopting and Revising Rules and Regulations workshop that was put on by Larry Smith, who has spent decades and decades as a principal planner in a number of towns. And it really had to do with the fact that planning boards are always looking to adopt rules and regulations, governing processes, procedures, and all of these things. And the workshop was a lot about what's allowed and what isn't allowed. What are the pros and cons of rules and regulations versus bylaws? And a lot of those things, there was quite a bit of time was spent on charging fees to cover the cost of the outside consultant to review those things as developers come into town. He also spent quite a bit of time talking about the new subdivision rules. So subdivision rules are very specific and they have to be extremely comprehensive, because if you are developing a subdivision, whatever is in the subdivision bylaws, that's what carries. So his recommendation was take a look at the subdivision rules to see if they're up to date with the most current one. And an area that I found particularly exciting was talking about how the town planner in a lot of the towns out this was out in Springfield, so this is Pioneer Valley Planning Council. But they were talking about having a 2-meeting maximum to get something through the planning process. And the only way that was accomplished was have developers come and meet with the planner and all of the relevant boards and things all in one place to discuss their project at the beginning, let them hear from all the different, conservation and all the different boards that are going to weigh in on this, have them have a conversation about it, send that person away with a kind of marching orders that this is what we're going to be looking for. And when they come and make that first presentation to the planning board, it's pretty close to a completed project, so that the timeline gets compressed tremendously, and we could become known as a very planning-friendly town, as opposed to a, oh my gosh, we've got to run through that gauntlet in Hopkinton. So some really good ideas, and there were like 20 different subjects, and this is my second term on Zach. Prior to that, I had no idea anything to do with zoning, and it was very, very enlightening for me. And some of you have been our veterans this thing and know a lot of it, but some really good stuff.
So, sorry, I had to leave the room for a minute. What drives that initial meeting? Because I think that's a great thing, where everybody's looking at the same thing and everybody's putting, their concerns on the table before you even start the process. Because I think a lot of ours is you go to planning and planning says, I want this, and then they go to Concom and they're contrary because they want this. What drives that initial meeting? Is it just an informal
It is an
thing?
informal thing, but it would be driven by our planner. John would be the one that would drive that.
And gets all the bodies in one room to have an informal...
Just conversation. I've got an idea that I want to develop a blah, blah, blah. You say, great, come on in. You get all those boards together, and the developer makes an informal presentation.
Because they do that now to some extent in front of the planning board, but only the planning board. They'll come in with,
Right.
This is what I have in mind. What do you think of my...
It's that same
my
thing,
idea.
but a much more comprehensive approach that will shorten the cycle of review.
So if I may, through the chair, I would take a look, and I apologize, I can't remember, it was probably a year ago now. Gardner, Massachusetts has a regulation in place that you need to have these pre-meetings prior to filing. And I think it may be for marijuana, but I'm not sure if it's for everything. But
Okay.
it's a good, I think it's a good example to look at to see how you can actually put it in your bylaws to say you need to have an initial meeting. And then once you get that sign off from I think it's planning director there, you can then apply. Because if it's just an informal request, they don't do it. I mean, I've told every applicant that they can come in and talk to me, and very few do.
No, I think it's great, because I think there's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of time in hearings where you sit through and you get this far, and then you've got to put this on the back burner, and you go over here, and it's a very convoluted process. I guess convoluted is not quite the right word.
Well, we
but
also lose time
disjointed process.
calling what we were talking about 2 months ago.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So that
So I
kind
think
of a
that, I think that would be very, very worthwhile to look at and consider. Do you know, John, how they do that? Do they have a once-a-month joint meeting to look at these things, or?
It's usually on demand, so, I'll have to look into it a little bit more, but you basically file a form that says, this is what I want to do for this
Okay.
development, and then that form triggers a meeting, whether it's with just department heads or whether it's with department heads and board members. You go through the process to figure some stuff out. Once they sign off on that, you can then move to the next phase of the application, which is more final, and then that gets presented to the board. So it's good.
But it would be more with the working people in the departments.
Yeah.
As opposed to boards.
Exactly. So it's good on both sides, I think, and I can talk to the planner over there to see how it actually has worked in practice. But you basically start the process before you've got all your plans done. Because you say, I have this concept, it's fleshed out for the most part, but there's still some wiggle room that we have. So whatever you guys need me to do, we can change at this point, rather than a lot of the developers will come in with essentially fully formed plans and say, this is what we're proposing. We can change some things, and that's kind of what the problem is. They've got a fully formed plan. You say, oh no, I want you to go and change that. So now they have to go back to their engineers, redesign, all that kind of stuff. So it's worth looking at and talking to them and seeing if it's something that has worked for that city.
I think absolutely. I think that would be.
And that was, the title of this thing is Adopting and Revising Rules and Regulations, and this would fall into that, similar to saying, when you're bringing your plans in, they have to be to this size, this scale. I mean, there are a lot of regulations that we can put in place and just say, this is how we do things here.
Those are in place in the subdivision regulations already.
Right.
Plan size and items that are required in the
Right, but
subdivision
I'm
plan.
saying this review process could become a regulation that just becomes, this is how it's done here.
So I forwarded the PowerPoint from Ron to all of you, so you can, light reading.
Through the chair, one more related thing. I did find out recently that for board members in town, the fees are covered by the town. So you can submit your expenses and you will get reimbursed for those. And CPTC is kind of the main training that the board members go through. So if you are interested in CPTC, let me know and we can work something out. But again, I'll throw advertisement in. The spring conference is really great because it's one day, a lot of sessions. It's in Worcester, so it's not super far. And there's a ton of other board members, planning people there. It's very busy, very exciting, and I would suggest everyone goes.
Do you have the date on that yet?
It's usually around St. Patrick's Day. I don't know.
Is that the Holy Cross one?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And what does CPTC stand for?
Citizen Planner Training.
Okay.
Cooperative?
Well,
or
yeah,
something?
I forget what
Yeah.
the second C stands for.
So I've signed up for one, I think it's the first week of December. And I sent that out a little while ago, so just if anybody wanted to join me, but there's other good ones you should definitely look at. Okay. Next topic is the fire sprinklers. So Carol and John and I recently attended a demonstration that the chief put on for the home fire sprinklers. And this was just fascinating, very interesting material. I sent you the website information and some things I chose off of there that were most relevant to us. The materials are very good. They're very self-explanatory. It helps a lot. But I just wanted to say that that potentially the opportunity for us in terms of zoning, from my understanding, the state does not allow us to require home fire sprinklers for new developments. So, but we can encourage it. And some things that, I mean, I think Elaine was at the demonstration as well, and she and I were talking about that, just, kind of chatting. And she was saying, in some of the rules and regulations in subdivision and so on, we can say, please present your plans for use of home fire sprinklers or the reason you're not going to do it, that kind of thing. It's like just using that kind of wording to make people think about it. And there's really good examples from even just very recent, obviously Legacy Farms, I don't know if it's in every unit, but they did do that. It enabled them to do higher density and allow more green space. And then a recent Whisper Way, we were negotiating with that developer, and it had to do with very long driveways and sometimes shared driveways and long cul-de-sac, and which all were needed because of wetlands and not wanting to, put a loop road in and encroach on wetlands as much. So it was all a lot of give and take between the wetlands, but the safety issue is really important. Also, and it really has to do with how quickly the fire department can get there in an emergency, but also the type of equipment that can get down narrow roads and so on. And we're in a situation where most of the more easily accessible land has been built. So the developments we're dealing with now are going to be down more winding roads and harder to access and so on. So, did you guys have anything to add? Love it.
And you are?
I think that was a wonderful description. Again, some of this we're trying to explore what our options are for the town, just in safety or community risk reduction. So the way you put it was wonderful. I think the idea is, the number one option is in planning that we can offer incentives to deal with some issues, like if there's, like you talked about, wetlands or terrain. It may be something like many of the towns use it for distance from municipal water systems as a factor. The one thing that we found just in that meeting is towns like Stowe and Medway and Holliston, and just some of our neighbors are doing the same type of thing, seeing how we can work with a developer and deal with some of these unique issues and have something that we can offer as an incentive that improves in safety. So even in our driveway access that we talked about, I'm able to do this with commercial properties under the CMRs in the state, and we can assess something. We did it with the Marathon School with some of the emergency access. There was some terrain issues, and I said, you know, they did some nice things for us to be able to position fire apparatus that were above and beyond the code. So I said, you know, a couple of feet off of the road, if it makes it better for you, then it's what you've done for us is good, and that's the kind of relationship we want to establish, and it's worked well. For private residents, it's a little more challenging. You know, they're trying to encourage building, but we don't want to lose sight of the safety issues. You know, if we get to the point where it gets too far and we haven't dealt with an issue, I think this is the opportunity, so I wanted to talk to you the way you presented it. I think another example, if I could just bring it up, that in this exploration was, I attended the Zoning Board of Appeals, looked at some properties around the lake that they wanted to, they were basically small camps that they wanted to make into larger houses. So they needed special permits. And I was able to talk to them a lot about the risk that comes with making bigger houses that are close and that have some limited access. I think everybody was kind of realizing the risk I talked about was there, but because the building code doesn't cover this special exemption area of it, so that now as a town, we're just saying yes or no to some type of this special permitting. I didn't feel like we were able to address the issue very well, and as much as everybody has good intentions, adding a home sprinkler system to a property isn't like something that everybody naturally says, oh, I want to do it. So we got to kind of try to figure a way to build it into some of these. Not every house is going to end up sprinklered, and that's not our goal right now. But what we're talking about is, I'm thinking of these examples of how can we get it so when we need a special permit and for somebody to be able to say yes and not ignore a safety issue while we're saying yes. It's, so those are the kind of two scenarios that I've been dealing with, and I want to solve it so that we could go to a town meeting or have a planning board feel really comfortable that we can build a consistent offering to a group, so that it is consistent and nobody feels like there's some special deal or favoritism. So
Right.
I kind of just in a homegrown effort here, I wanted to show you what it was about, and I think we had a good demonstration of what that was. It was nice to see some other communities get involved, and I hope we can kind of build, whether it's a bylaw or some type of process that is acceptable to the community. That's what I'm thinking about.
Right. And I remember the insurance issue that you brought up to me and we talked about, that, and particularly in situations where, you know, long driveways, et cetera, that people have often, you know, when they're buying a new house, they don't think about sprinklers, they don't think about the insurance rates, they think, oh yeah, it's just insurance, you just, you know, get home insurance. But it was astronomically expensive because of some of the safety issues, and with home sprinklers, it can drive down the insurance rates considerably. So it is something that I think should be a part of a package of things that we talk to people about. And developers may not be as much, you know, encouraged by that aspect of it, but you know, the more consumers become aware of it, the more developers will pay attention to it as well, so.
Yeah, I think we were able to, it was wonderful at Whisper Way to be able to get Ron Nation to to talk with us and, you know, take that leap was a great example of, I think we're making progress.
He said that, too,
Yeah,
that he
20
hadn't
years
been-
ago, it was just you just don't do that.
Yeah.
So we've kind of broken through that. We're recognizing the safety. The cost points have gone down. As you mentioned earlier, there's literally going to be 1,000 units in legacy farms that are sprinklered units. We already have a fire that was contained with nobody home to the area of origin, and that's a success story. It's, you know, those units are close, and with nobody home, if that fire was discovered by the time it's leaving a window, like some of the other fires we had right when I started as chief, you know, there's, when the density is like that, now you're risking your neighbors' properties, and so that was a wonderful application of it solved the problem, and they were able to do the other things, like you said, open space and, you know, denser and easier access or whatever comes on the board, so. My little experts here, so I want to, any other topic you think we want to just add in?
No, I think you had an excellent segue in to just say we now have some more atypical situations of proposals of these developments. And as the chief mentioned, we have, you know, different access issues or water issues. And as those who attended, just to understand, today we're building different homes. We're putting different contents in our homes that are making fires burn faster, burn hotter, and to kind of address all these issues. 40 years ago, we had 17 minutes to escape a home fire. Now we're down to 2 to 3 minutes. That time frame has really shrunk. So now when we have these atypical situations where we're increasing our risk, I think it's great if we can consider something to bring that risk back down. And I think a lot of you saw the home fire sprinklers are definitely an option that we should all kind of have on the table, talk about. I think, like you mentioned, educating people about that. I think seeing it was believing it. Yeah. And that would be kind of what I'd just like to add to it.
Madam Chair, the documentation that you shared was very, very useful. A lot of that I felt was the incentives part of it for the builder. What was in it for them? It was very clear. I think the officer just said, nailed upon something, which is the public awareness. So I, as a homeowner, need to know that this is important for me, but also what kind of cost am I looking at? Can I do this using existing plumbing? Does it require new plumbing? I think there is an opportunity for us to maybe have a public campaign just to talk about the inherent risks of not having that, not scaring people, but educating them. And talking about how it can be overlaid on top of a pre-existing home, pre-existing plumbing, and giving them some idea of how to calculate costs. Ultimately, I think it comes down to people worry more about their pocketbooks rather than, okay, a fire unlikely event, I'll worry about that later. But if that can be sort of classified as, here is a cost point, a price point for that, versus the price point for an insurance loss or what you're going to lose, I think there is an opportunity for us to look into some kind of public awareness campaign as a town.
I think that's very reasonable, and certainly, you know, you guys are leaders of that, and I know that at the Poly Arts and the Family Day.
It was Family Day, we did a public
Family Day,
demonstration,
you were
right?
doing some education programs and so on. The website that I forwarded to you, there's other materials that I didn't specifically pick out, that are more geared toward consumers.
Okay.
So if you know, on a personal level, want to look into that more, you can certainly do so. But they have a lot of good information on there that's very usable and adaptable even to you know, local needs.
Okay.
If we want to do anything like that, so.
Sundar brought up a good point, is to make this effective, it's building the new home is the time to make it happen. It's tough.
So much easier.
Yeah, that's the time. So that's why, you know, I know we've done a lot of building in Hopkinton, but the opportunity is the lots that are going to be developed in the future are these more challenging lots, and this is where this incentive program is the most effective, and where they're going to look to the fire chief just to say, let the person build a house. And I'm saying, these are challenging. They're gonna be in areas that don't have municipal water, that have lots of rocks and ledges and they're gonna ask, can you somehow get in the driveway? And that's what we're gonna run into more and more, and it puts us all in a tough spot. So I'm trying to have something that gets us to yes, where we can have this incentive there. And the cost points that they're talking about are so much better now than they were 15 years ago. And now, if you can, we haven't identified the insurance savings part, so that's our goal, to try to see if we can better produce that as a number.
Yeah, we ought to be able to, like, get some sample quotes of,
Yes. Yep.
from various insurance companies, so.
But we'd like to know too, is there a way, it's not just gonna flow, even with some of the education, the interest level fades off. There's
Yeah.
gotta be a way we can give this a little bit of a bump, that we can get some more interest when somebody's building a home, whether it's a bylaw or whatever allows us to do it. Again, I think it's the bylaw that deals with, it's not a typical situation. It's a long way from public water, it's got some challenging access issues, they're looking to create open space, so they're asking for density. We gotta figure out how to apply it there and try to build it into our system there,
Right.
if that's possible.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I like the question on the initial thing. What's your plan for it? And if you're not putting it in there, what's your reason? Because then at least it brings it into the conversation and it becomes a negotiation point. If they don't want to put it in and they want long driveways and they're in a bad terrain, then it becomes something to discuss further and to, reassess and go back to and bring back again.
And I think a nudge helps too, right?
At least it's coming up at the front. When it's not, it's not an expensive add to a new construction home, but it is to an existing home.
Exactly.
So
It's
is
much
there,
harder to retrofit.
if there is a bylaw that talks about the water usage for new development, maybe adding language in there saying that if you have municipal water, consider sprinkler system along with because any new developer will look at the water usage bylaw. Maybe the language can it go there, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yep.
I think that's something we'll just have to kind of explore and see where, like we said, we want to look at those challenging situations and where we have something that's increasing our risk, and if we have that, then that's when we start talking about, okay, there's an increased risk here, what are we going to do to bring it back down to a typical proposal?
Yeah, wasn't there something about the water usage actually from sprinklers is much less than the water usage from a fire hose to put out your fire? So, yeah, so that.
Causes much less damage if you use a sprinkler
Yeah,
rather
that's
than a
true.
fire hose.
We use a lot of water.
No, the force
To that
itself.
point.
No, it was an amazing demonstration. It opened my eyes up. I literally went back and I was like, can we put sprinklers in our house? And then I was like, oh, we have well water. But that's why I was like, I would look at water options first, and that's where I was like, maybe it should say there, if you have municipal, consider sprinklers, like.
Yes.
I'm
Almost a
sorry, I didn't
suggested
say that you were there
recommendation.
too.
Just a suggested recommendation in the,
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out where the language can go in, and I
Correct.
can't figure out which section.
right.
And I'm not an expert at the ZAC part, and that's why I'm hoping you can help and we develop something that's acceptable to town meeting and everybody. I don't want to be up there just lecturing safety stuff.
Right,
I know.
That we
But
problem solve together.
But if we do take it to town meeting, I would,
I would happily get up, yes.
Correct me I understood from the presentation that you couldn't legislate it. You couldn't put it in your bylaw as a requirement.
So I think it's the universal, you have to put a home fire sprinkler system in every house.
every new
So
home.
now I'm just trying to say, is there a way? It sounds like some communities, there was some legislation that we saw out of Berlin, Mass, and in these towns. Again, it may be me going to a planning board or the way we accept these developments, that when these conditions exist, then this would take place.
Okay.
That's kind of the discovery part of this. So we could ask town council at what level if that's the right.
Through the chair, if I may, just to clarify, I think one of the ways and I'm probably going to be repeating because you described it very well, but for a development, you can't make a condition that all units need to be sprinklered, but you might be able to say for units requiring a waiver of the driveway length, those will only get the waiver if they're sprinklered. that kind of a thing. Or if there's a special permit that they need to get for common driveways, as a condition of that special permit, then they
Okay.
would need a sprinkler. Whereas they don't need to get the special permit for common driveways if they design the development a different way. But if they need a permit for that development, just in general, then you probably couldn't require all the units to have it.
So you could add it as a condition to your special permits?
I would think to certain waivers or special permits, not to all special permits.
Okay.
I have learned from the planning board, there's a lot of waivers that come through every project that I'm sitting there, so that's been my learning curve, so I'm hoping that
Oh,
with
yeah.
all the waivings going on, we can get a little of this going on there, so.
Yes, definitely. Good, thank you so much.
Thank you for the time, I appreciate you all attending too, that was very nice for
Thank you.
us.
That was great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So Rhea also sent us some information, or I forwarded the information on a podcast, which is a very easy way of doing self-training. So, and she found that this particular thing was interesting. So I just encourage you to look into it. Thank you. I believe, other than that, it's just minutes, right, John? Okay. So we have minutes from, is it October 10th, or is it?
September 30th and October 10th.
Oh, okay. I thought we already approved the September 30th ones, but people have a chance to review the minutes?
I did.
Good. Any changes to the September 30th minutes? No? No? Okay. Okay.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor of approving, are we going to do both at once? The
No,
motions?
you only asked.
September
about
30th, just September 30th first. All in favor of approving? Aye. Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay. Now the October 10th minutes, any changes?
It could just be a typo, but I think, John, your name is both in present and absent on the list of people.
He was probably late.
Yeah.
You were late. You were late that day, yeah, so he was
So I
present.
was both.
No, I'm not, now that
That's exactly correct. I can't believe I made it on time here. I was at the weeds meeting before this
That's
at the
right.
at DPW. And then I flew out of here and I said, oh my goodness, luckily I borrowed my daughter's truck.
Broke a few laws on the way
No,
here.
her clock is 5 minutes fast. So.
So it
It
tricked
worked.
you
It
into
tricked
getting
me,
here.
and I made it here on
Time
time.
machine, not a
Yes.
truck.
Okay, so motion to,
Motion to accept. Thank you.
second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, abstentions? Great.
Who seconded that one?
You're gonna have to get real good at taking notes, aren't you, with Kobe not attending the planning board anymore?
Steph is gonna do that. So we have a new person.
No kidding. Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions?
Very good. Thank you very much for coming,
Thank
the
you.
audience.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Thank you. All set.